the story of Anshin and Kiyohime handed down at Dojoji Temple. It is a record of a terrifying phenomenon where human passion takes a physical form, transcending the framework of mere old legends or folklore. This tragedy, told since the Heian period, depicts the ruin of a young monk and a girl who fell madly in love with him. However, why did Kiyohime have to abandon her humanity and transform into a giant serpent? There, a muddy, negative energy swirls beyond our imagination. From the perspective of modern psychology and physics, Kiyohime's transformation could be called a phenomenon of materialization caused by an abnormal level of concentration. If you were to love someone from the bottom of your heart, and that love was betrayed, at that moment, the possibility that the same flame as Kiyohime's would ignite within your body is by no means zero. The village of Manago, where Kiyohime lived, was a quiet place surrounded by deep mountains. It was there that Anshin, a beautiful monk on a journey of ascetic practice, stopped by. For Kiyohime, meeting Anshin was a powerful ray of light that pierced through her tedious daily life. Despite being at an age where innocence still remained, she began to show an abnormal obsession toward Anshin. On the other hand, Anshin, though a man of practice, was bewildered by Kiyohime's intense approach and ended up making a haphazard promise on the spot, a lie of convenience saying he would surely stop by again on his way back. Anshin at that time had no way of knowing that this small lie would later turn into a hellfire, strong enough to burn down an entire village. Have you ever felt a rage so intense you couldn't control it when betrayed by someone important? The moment she learned that Anshin had broken his promise and passed by to avoid her, something inside Kiyohime's heart broke decisively. Kiyohime started running barefoot along the steep mountain path. Her appearance was already insane, her hair was disheveled, her eyes were bloodshot, and a beast-like groan was said to leak from her mouth. What drove her was not pure love, but a tremendous spirit of revenge for being betrayed. When she reached the banks of the Hidaka River, changes began to occur in Kiyohime's body. Her body temperature rose abnormally due to intense anger. Her skin became covered in hard scales, and her limbs degenerated, connecting into a long torso. It was not biological evolution, but a cruel process of mutation, where spiritual energy forcibly rewrote the flesh. In front of the raging torrent of the Hidaka River, Kiyohime finally transformed completely into a giant serpent. Her human words were lost, and only an eerie roar, like calling Anshin's name, echoed around. Kiyohime, having no means to cross the river, sliced through the waves with her giant snake body and swam to the opposite bank at a furious speed. In Kiyohime's eyes at this time, the human, named Anshin, was likely no longer visible, only his existence as a target to be erased. The villagers who witnessed this saw the river surface turn bright, red and steam rising, and they trembled, thinking the gates of hell had opened. Imagine the terror of the energy called obsession, interfering with the real world to such an extent and moving with physical mass. Anshin fled for his life into Dojoji Temple. The monks of the temple, feeling pity for Anshin, as he sought help with a pale face, hid him inside a massive bronze bell located on the grounds. The heavy bronze bell was supposed to be a robust shield to protect him from external enemies. However, who could have predicted that this would become Anshin's headstone? It was a giant serpent of fire, dozens of meters long, that destroyed the temple gates and surged into the grounds. When Kiyohime found the bell where Anshin was hiding, she wrapped her massive body around it multiple times. Then, with the hellfire erupting from her own body, she began to heat the bell until it was glowing red. The temperature inside the bell rose in an instant, and Anshin perished in a scream within the scorched cage, from which there was no escape, turning into charcoal. This tremendous conclusion symbolizes the destructive aspect of the emotion called love. The fire that Kiyohime emitted was not a physical fire like that used for burning charcoal, but a spiritual fire where her soul itself went up in flames. After burning Anshin to death, it is said that Kiyohime left a sorrowful voice once and threw herself into a nearby inlet to commit suicide, killing the one you loved with your own hands, and then paying the price yourself. This chain of tragedy continues to repeat in different forms, even in modern times. It is no exaggeration to say that the shadow of Kiyohime always lurks behind stalker problems and incidents caused by intense passion. Have you ever imagined the moment your love turns into a flame that consumes the other person? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments section. A new bell was later donated to Dojoji Temple to replace the one destroyed in this incident. However, on the day of the memorial service, when the bell was completed, another mysterious incident occurred. A single shirabyoshi dancer appeared, and while she was approaching the bell while performing a dance, the bell suddenly fell, swallowing her up. When they checked inside, it is said that there was once again the figure of a giant snake. Kiyohime's resentment remained in that land even after death, continuing to show an abnormal rejection of the existence of the bell. Even if the physical body is destroyed, intense thoughts are engraved as information in that place and are reproduced across hundreds of years. This is the true nature of paranormal phenomena, and the reason why Kiyohime is still talked about today. It is easy to dismiss the story of Kiyohime as mere superstition. However, there are many similar giant serpent legends all over Japan. Why is it that many of them are related to women's jealousy or sadness? It may be because ancient Japanese people instinctively feared the fundamental power of life hidden within women, or the destructive energy that cannot be stopped once ignited. Kiyohime became a giant snake, but that was not just her individual problem. It merely shows a part of the latent transformation ability possessed by the human species. If placed in an extreme state, can we say for certain that the ancient memories engraved in our DNA will never awaken and change our form? Finally, what the legend of Kiyohime is asking us is the weight of promises and the control of emotions. If Anchin had faced her with sincerity, or if Kiyohime had known a way to calm her own heart, such a tragedy would not have happened. However, humans are always imperfect and are creatures that make mistakes. It is said that when you visit the site of the bell at Dojoji Temple, you can still feel a certain heat and a gaze that pierces the skin. That might be because Kiyohime is still crawling through the darkness of the grounds today, looking for insincere people who break their promises. Is there anyone around you with an unusually strong sense of obsession? That person might be a modern-day potential Kiyohime. Where exactly is the boundary between love and obsession? The story of Kiyohime reflects the figure of the monster dwelling in the depths of our hearts that we usually look away from. If you have the chance to visit Dojoji Temple, try listening closely to the sound of that bell. Within that resonance, you might hear the cry of Anshin, writhing in pain, and the sobbing of Kiyohime driven mad by sadness. Whether you laugh this story off as just an old tale, or take it as a lesson to restrain the Kiyohime within yourself, is up to you. If this video touched your heart even a little, please give it a high rating and subscribe to the channel. Please also share your mysterious experiences or episodes of obsessive people in the comments section. In the heart of a bustling city, far removed from the clamor and constant hum of human activity, there sits a lone house. What thoughts come to mind when you encounter such a sight? Perhaps images of a tranquil life, a peaceful retirement, or a serene existence away from the madding crowd might cross your mind. These are often the positive associations we make. However, in the ancient folklore and traditions passed down through generations in Japan, a single isolated house known as a hitotsuya has long been a place of dread, shunned and feared as a lair for terrifying specters and strange occurrences. This fear is deeply intertwined with the festering emotions and psychological darkness harbored by individuals who have been socially isolated. The hitotsuya, said to have once stood in Ishihama, Asakusa, carries with it the tragic tale of an old woman who relentlessly murdered travelers. This is no mere folk tale. It resonates deeply with modern-day phenomena such as kodokushi, lonely deaths, and the amplified madness that can fester in spaces cut off from society. All these are profoundly connected to the negative facets inherent in the concept of a hitotsuya. Today, we delve into the inescapable curse that resides within these hitotsuya and the desperate cries of those trapped within their confines. If, on your way home, you were to discover an old, solitary house, would you dare to knock on its door? The legend of Hitotsuya, a tale that has been passed down through generations in the Asakusa region, tells a cruel story of an old woman who continually took the lives of travelers. In the marshlands of Ishihama stood this house, where the old woman lived with her beautiful daughter. Night after night, she would invite travelers seeking lodging into her home, and then, as they slept. She would drop a large stone upon them, killing them. It is said that her purpose was not merely to steal their money and valuables, but to collect their living blood. What do you infer from this vivid description? It is more than just the terror of a common robbery murder. The old woman's cold, unwavering gaze, the dull thud of the heavy stone as it fell these scenes, repeated night after night in the darkness, embody a madness that could only flourish in such an isolated place. Cries for help would go unheard, lost in the damp wind that whispered through the desolate landscape. In such circumstances, how does the human mind warp and transform? Do you have the confidence that you could retain your sanity if you were completely cut off from society, utterly alone? Please, share your thoughts in the comment section below. Why did the old woman of Hitotsuya resort to such cruel acts? Behind her actions lay a blind, all-consuming love, her desperate desire to cure her daughter's illness. The distorted belief that collecting the blood of 1,000 travelers would heal her daughter's incurable disease transformed the old woman into a demon. Yet, this very motive strikes at the core of the Hitotsuya phenomenon. Social isolation often breeds extreme ideologies and obsessive compulsions. In an environment where there is no one to consult, and no criticism from the outside world can penetrate, individuals can convince themselves that their actions, no matter how abnormal, are the only correct path. In modern society, incidents of murder-suicide and other tragic events stemming from caregiver, burnout, or financial hardship are all too common. Could these not be seen as contemporary manifestations of the Hitotsuya phenomenon? A room in a high-rise apartment building surrounded by towering walls, the loneliness of urban life where neighbors' faces are unknown. Perhaps these are the invisible Hitotsuya of our time. The legend's conclusion is both deeply ironic and tragic. The old woman's choice for her 1,000th victim was none other than her own beloved daughter. While some versions suggest that the Bodhisattva canon, disguised as a pilgrim, took the daughter's place to awaken the old woman, it was undoubtedly her cherished, singular existence that the old woman's hand struck down. The agonizing scream of her beloved, realized only after the stone had fallen, shatters all her previous obsessions in that instant. The Hitotsuya as a place ultimately transforms into the very place where one inflicts the deepest wounds upon oneself. The more one deepens their isolation, the more what they tried to protect slips through their fingers, leaving behind only blood-stained regret. What does this tragedy tell us? It speaks to the danger of severing ties with others and creating a closed-off world of one's own. No matter how noble the initial intention, a self-righteous, exclusive love can devolve into a monstrous entity. From a psychiatric perspective, the Hitotsuya phenomenon can be interpreted as the personification of mental alterations, such as depersonalization, severe depression, or paranoia. When a person spends a long time in isolation, detached from society, their brain loses external stimuli, and their thoughts begin to loop incessantly. Silence can sometimes be the trigger for auditory and visual hallucinations. The creaking of pillars might sound like footsteps, and shadows outside the window might appear as monstrous entities watching them. The process by which a resident of a Hitotsuya gradually transforms into a yokai mirrors the very process of mental breakdown. In ancient Japan, such individuals were often treated as kakushi hidden ones, or residents of hidden villages, relegated to the realm of the otherworldly. But how does that differ from a social death in modern times? Beyond the physical structure of a house, there is a Hitotsuya built within the mind. When one can no longer escape from it, perhaps that is when they truly become a yokai. Tracing back through history, the term Hitotsuya often referred to a solitary dwelling that lacked the function of a lodging or inn. Edo period texts frequently featured tales of travelers who, having lost their way, stumbled upon the eerie abode of a strange old woman. These narratives reflect the anxieties and fears of people in those times, towards unknown territories and unfamiliar others. Anyone who existed outside the communal village structure was no longer considered fully human, but rather an enigmatic entity. Such prejudices solidified the Hitotsuya ghost stories. Those who were ostracized nurtured their grievances, which then escalated into genuine supernatural phenomena. Behind the ghost stories we now enjoy lies a hidden history of exclusion that once existed in reality. If you were invited into an isolated house on the outskirts of a village during your travels, even if the host offered you warm tea, could you truly feel at ease? What if that kindness was merely a trap to lower your guard? In contemporary ghost stories, the hitotsuya continues to exist in various forms. The sound of a baby crying from an abandoned house that should be empty. A single light glowing in a house in a village not found on any map. What these episodes share is an abnormal sense of incongruity. A space where the rules of normal social life do not apply, that is a hitotsuya. Time stands still there, and the residents exist in a state that is neither truly living nor truly dead. In one anecdote, a man who ran out of gas on a mountain road late at night sought help at a nearby private house, where he witnessed a funeral being conducted in an unfamiliar, ancient style. However, when he checked the next morning, there was only an empty plot with nothing but foundations remaining. This is the spatial distortion that a hitotsuya possesses. The place itself absorbs grudges and memories, materializing only under specific conditions. Is there an unnaturally preserved old house near you standing alone? Is there truly a way to escape the terror of the hitotsuya? In legends, travelers are often saved through faith or serendipitous intervention. However, there are hardly any stories that save the resident side. Like the old woman, a soul that has once become a resident of a hitotsuya is destined to be bound to that land or that role forever. To prevent social detachment and psychological isolation, we must constantly keep our windows open to the outside world. However, the stresses of modern society can sometimes compel us to choose withdrawal. Before we know it, we might be closing the doors of our own hearts, stacking up stones within ourselves. Those stones might one day fall upon someone precious. Loneliness can be both a poison and a cure. But excessive loneliness can undoubtedly transform a person into something monstrous. When you spend time alone, how much do you consider to be healthy solitude? Finally, imagine the scene the old woman of hitotsuya witnessed in her final moments. Perhaps it was the intensely cold moonlight seen at the culmination of despair. After having killed her daughter, by being remembered as a yokai, she is forever burdened with her sin. However, if just one person had accompanied her in her loneliness and shared her madness, the tragedy might never have occurred. Ghost stories serve as a warning to us of the importance of reaching out to isolated souls before they are swallowed by darkness. The hitotsuya still lies in wait somewhere for someone. It could be deep in the forest, or it could be in the room next to yours. Through this story, we need to confront the loneliness within ourselves and re-examine our connections with others. We hope this video can shed even a little light on the darkness in your heart. To be liberated from the curse of hitotsuya, we must first acknowledge its existence, the fact that anyone can become a monster. It is said that there is still a memorial tower for the old woman at Kanenji Temple in Asakusa. People of later generations vowed not to forget the crimes she committed and the sorrow that lay behind them. The legend of hitotsuya is not merely a horror story, but a mirror reflecting human weakness and the distorted nature of love. If you are feeling profound loneliness right now, please open the door of that hitotsuya yourself. The winds outside may be harsh, but there will surely be a voice calling to you. Before you are swallowed by loneliness, reach out to someone. And if there is someone around you who seems to be building a hitotsuya, gently remove those stones for them. That is the only means of combating this phenomenon in modern times. The tragedy of the old woman of hitotsuya. What feelings arose within you having listened to this story to the very end? Was it terror or perhaps deep sadness? Invisible hitotsuya abound around us. If this story has resonated with you even a little, please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Also, if you have any stories about mysterious, isolated houses or personal experiences with loneliness-related fears, please share them in the comments section. Your words might just save someone from their loneliness. Until next time, be very careful of lone houses on dark roads. Have you ever felt a presence behind you and turned around while walking alone on a dark night road? Or have you ever felt as if something far larger than yourself was standing beyond the darkness, where nothing should be, and instinctively cowered? Mikoshi Nudo is a yokai passed down since ancient times in various parts of Japan. It is a terrifying entity said to grow taller the more you look up at it, eventually crushing the person looking up or biting their throat. However, this monster is not merely a resident of old tales. When unraveled from the perspectives of modern science and psychology, it becomes clear that it is closely related to the brain's unique mechanisms, humans' fundamental fear of heights and defensive instincts against the dark. Why do we feel fear in the act of looking up? And why did the people of the Edo period depict this phenomenon as a single giant monk? Tonight, we will dive deep into the identity of Mikoshi Nudo, which can be called the greatest illusion produced by vision and the oldest form of fear. The name Mikoshi Nudo literally comes from the word Mikosu, meaning to look over or look beyond. The greatest characteristic of this yokai is that its body expands infinitely as the person facing it looks higher and higher. Imagine this. A man with a shaved head stands at a crossroad on a dark night road. At first, he appears to be about the same height as you, but when you lift your face to make eye contact, his head quickly rises above the roofs, above the trees, and finally becomes large enough to cover the night sky. At this moment, the witness is overwhelmed by the sheer scale and is said to fall backward. It is easy to dismiss this as a mere hallucination, but this is actually a powerful bug in the human visual system. Have you ever seen a shadow move where it shouldn't be when looking at a place where streetlights don't reach? Please tell us about your mysterious visual experiences on night roads in the comments section. This phenomenon of giantism is thought to involve psychological mechanisms similar to the Charpentier effect, or the misperception of perspective. In the dark, it becomes difficult to measure the exact distance to an object. In particular, the action of directing one's gaze upward causes a temporary disturbance in the human semicircular canals and sense of balance. The posture of looking up compresses the nerves in the neck and changes blood flow. This causes the brain to receive false signals that one's own body is shrinking, or that the object in front is rapidly expanding. The yokai Mikoshi Nudo can be said to be an embodiment of the physiological dizziness or lightheadedness that people of that time shared as a common image. The Mikoshi Nudo painted by the Edo period. Artist Toriyama Sekian has an extremely long neck and a terrifying face, which is exactly the shape of the distortion of the world felt the moment one looks up. Furthermore, it is interesting that Mikoshi Nudo is said to appear in specific locations, slopes, on bridges, or at crossroads and boundaries. These places have something in common. They are places where the view seems open, but because of the difference in elevation, the line of sight tends to move up and down. Especially when looking up from the bottom of a slope, the human brain tends to perceive things on the slope as larger and closer than they actually are. Instinctive fear of heights is also involved. While the fear of falling from a high place is a survival instinct carved into our genes, Mikoshi Nudo can be seen as a reversal of this acrophobia. Even though your feet are on the ground, by looking up, you fall into the illusion of being exposed to a high place and lose your sense of balance. People likened the object of that fear to the figure of a monk. Methods for dealing with Mikoshi Nudo when encountered have also been passed down throughout the country. The most famous is to shout, "I have seen through you," and prostrate yourself, or conversely, to posture, as if looking down on the opponent. This is very logical. By speaking words, you suppress your own panic, and by lowering your gaze or intentionally shifting your focus, you are effective in canceling the illusion of giantism created by the brain. If Mikoshi Nudo were to appear before you, would you be able to endure the fear and speak? Or would you simply be overwhelmed and fall backward? This battle of wits with the yokai is also a psychological battle over how to control the fear created by your own brain. There is also a strong theory that the true identity of Mikoshi Nudo is a transformed animal, such as a weasel, a fox, or an otter. When these small nocturnal animals suddenly appear from the shadows, the startled human brain overreacts and converts them into a giant monster. People of that time may have maintained mental stability by blaming phenomena that could not be explained scientifically on the actions of animals or yokai. However, even in modern times, there is no end to eyewitness accounts of seeing giant human figures on dark mountain roads or in ruins. Isn't that proof that the yokai of the past have changed their form and still inhabit the brains of modern people? Even in urban areas, you may be struck by the same sensation in the gaps between skyscrapers or at construction sites at night. From a folkloric perspective, Mikoshi Nudo is also thought to be a transformed figure of a mountain, god or a god of boundaries. A boundary is a place where this world and the other world meet. As an entity guarding that place, Mikoshi Nudo existed. He may have grown larger to intimidate people trying to pass through, and to prevent intrusion into forbidden lands. The act of looking up signifies submission or awe toward the opponent. In other words, looking up at Mikoshi Nudo means yielding to the power of the other world, and it carries a harsh lesson that your life will be taken as a result. In the dark back alleys we unconsciously avoid, an old god may still be hiding his giant body. The legend of Mikoshi Nudo is widely distributed across Japan, including Shikoku, Kyushu, and Kanto, but the names and characteristics differ slightly by region. For example, in Kaga, present-day Ishikawa Prefecture, Mikoshi Nudo is said to appear in bamboo groves and possesses the quality of becoming giant when looked up at. Bamboo is a plant that grows straight and tall, and it is not hard to imagine that its swaying and height served as a visual trigger. In this way, the yokai was engraved into people's memories, while changing its form to match the scenery and environment of the land. What kind of Mikoshi Nudo legends remain in the area where you live? Or have you heard of any other tall yokai? Finally, let's think about the message Mikoshi Nudo poses to modern times. We are now surrounded by more information than ever before, spending our days always looking up at something or being overwhelmed by something. In the midst of giant systems and the waves of society, you may feel small. However, what the defeat method of Mikoshi Nudo teaches us is the importance of facing reality without fear, to not be deceived by illusions, and to look forward with your feet on the ground. That may be the only way to overcome the monsters lurking in the darkness. Mikoshi Nudo may still be behind you, waiting for you to turn around and look up. At that time, please remember, the one creating that giant shadow may be none other than your own heart. How was tonight's story? The identity of Mikoshi Nudo, an old yet new yokai. It was a sophisticated illusion created by the human brain, and a phantom created by the instinct for survival. If you have any mysterious experiences where the scenery suddenly distorted, or something looked giant on a night road, please let us know in detail in the comments section. Also, if you found this video interesting, please subscribe to the channel and give it a high rating. Well then, that's all for tonight. Please be very careful of the presence behind you. Have you ever allowed a chilling thought to drift through the periphery of your consciousness? A suspicion so cold it makes the very marrow of your bones ache with dread? Imagine, if you will, that the person sitting across from you at this very moment, the one whose smile you have known for a lifetime, and whose habits are as familiar to you as your own breath, has been replaced. Suppose that behind those well-known eyes an entirely different entity is peering out, mimicking every gesture and tone with surgical precision, yet lacking any shred of the soul that once resided there. In the ancient, mist-shrouded traditions of Japan, there exists a creature born of this very nightmare, a being known as the Amanojaku. To the casual observer or the modern storyteller, the Amanojaku is often dismissed as a mere trickster, a diminutive goblin characterized by a stubborn streak or a penchant for minor mischief. However, such a sanitized interpretation does a grave disservice to the sheer existential horror of its true nature. The Amanojaku is not a playful spirit, but a profound spiritual parasite, a creature that slides into the microscopic fractures of the human psyche to subvert our most sacred impulses. It is the architect of inversion, a force that transmutes genuine kindness into jagged malice and weaves threads of hatred into the fabric of love. In our contemporary world, the word is tossed around lightly to describe a contrary personality, yet few comprehend the abyssal depths from which this entity emerged. What we are about to explore is far removed from the safe confines of a children's fable. This is a journey into a primal, shape-shifting darkness that, even now, may be sharpening its claws within the shadow of your own neighbor, or perhaps in the unmapped corners of your own heart. To truly grasp the magnitude of this threat, we must trace the lineage of the Amanojaku back to the very dawn of creation, specifically to the tumultuous era of the Japanese gods. Its origins are inextricably linked to Susanoo no Mikoto, the god of storms and the sea, a deity whose volatile temperament often brought chaos to the celestial plains of Takamagahara. Legend tells us that when Susanoo was consumed by a particularly virulent surge of internal fury, a concentrated miasma of divine rage and sorrow, he exhaled a powerful dark breath, From this exhale of pure negativity was born the goddess Amanozako. According to the Wakan Sansai Zue, an encyclopedic masterpiece of the Edo period, Amanozako was a creature of singular grotesqueness. She possessed the torso of a human, but her face was a terrifying bestial mask with a nose so unnervingly long it defied nature, accompanied by ears of immense size and tusks that could rend the spirit asunder. More terrifying than her physical form, however, was her inherent psychological disposition. She possessed the uncanny ability to perceive the deepest desires and thoughts of others, yet she used this insight for the sole purpose of contradiction. If a person sought peace, she brought turmoil. If they sought construction, she brought ruin. The Amanojaku is the direct spiritual descendant of this primordial goddess, inheriting her legacy of divine rebellion. It is, in every sense, a crystalline manifestation of pure, unadulterated evil, a being that exists as a permanent protest against the harmony of the universe. The name itself suggests a demon that opposes the very heavens, a fundamental insurgent against the cosmic order. Let us now dissect the most harrowing of all Amanojaku legends, the tale of Urikohime, or the Melon Princess, through a lens of profound psychological and atmospheric detail. Deep within a valley where the mountains seemed to lean in, close to eavesdrop on the living, there lived an elderly couple who discovered a beautiful girl inside a giant melon. This girl, Urikohime, was the light of their twilight years, a maiden of such purity and skill at the loom that she seemed more like a celestial gift than a mortal child. One fateful afternoon, when the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the old couple had departed for the village, leaving the princess alone, the silence was shattered by a low, vibrating voice from outside the door. It was the Amanojaku. It did not attack with brute force instead. It began a slow, calculated siege of her will. It spoke in a voice that sounded like a distorted echo of her own thoughts, pleading for just a crack of the door to be opened. Every refusal from the princess was met with a more ingenious manipulation, a layering of false vulnerability that eventually eroded her caution. In the versions of the story that have been whispered through generations, the sequence of events that follows is nothing short of a nightmare rendered in flesh. Once inside, the Amanojaku did not merely end the girl's life. It sought to erase her very existence. It committed an act of unspeakable desecration, effectively terminating her vital functions. And then, with the precision of a master craftsman, peeling the skin from her body. The creature then draped this stolen visage over its own warped frame, stepping into her identity with a chilling fluidity. When the sun began its slow descent, casting long skeletal shadows across the floorboards, the elderly couple returned to find what they believed was their beloved daughter. Sitting at her loom, the sound of the shuttle moving back and forth, clack, swish, clack, seemed identical to the rhythm they had always known. Yet beneath that familiar skin, the Amanojaku was silent, its eyes gleaming with a predatory triumph as it mimicked her voice and her gentle mannerisms. This story serves as a visceral metaphor for the fragility of the self. It forces us to confront the terrifying possibility that our identities are merely garments that can be stripped away and worn by a monster, and that those who love us most might be incapable of sensing the presence of the interloper. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own interactions. Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to sabotage a relationship that you cherish, or to utter a biting remark to someone who has offered you nothing but warmth? Perhaps you have encountered an individual whose every word seems designed to derail a conversation or to undermine the emotional stability of a group. Yet they do so with a smile that never reaches their eyes. If these scenarios resonate with you, consider the possibility that you are not dealing with a simple personality clash, but with the lingering influence of the Amanojaku's shadow. In the realm of behavioral science, we often discuss the concept of psychological reactance, the instinctive urge to do the opposite of what is requested in order to preserve one's sense of autonomy. The Amanojaku, however, represents this phenomenon, escalated to the level of a metaphysical weapon. They are masters of the counter-narrative, possessing a preternatural ability to identify the precise moment when an individual is most vulnerable to betrayal. They don't just act out of spite. They act with a strategic cruelty intended to dismantle the target's mental architecture. When a person reaches out in a moment of profound isolation, the Amanojaku-influenced entity will deliberately turn away, not out of indifference, but to maximize the sting of rejection. This is an active predatory form of dominance that aims for nothing less than the total erosion of the victim's spirit. In the sacred architecture of Japanese Buddhism, the physical representation of the Amanojaku is both fascinating and deeply symbolic. If you walk through the hallowed halls of ancient temples and look at the towering statues of the four heavenly kings, the guardians of the cardinal directions, you will find the Amanojaku in a position of utter humiliation. They are the small, muscular demons being trampled under the heavy, armored feet of deities like Bishamonten. At first glance, this appears to be a simple depiction of good triumphing over evil, yet a closer inspection reveals a more complex truth. Despite being crushed by the weight of divine justice, the faces of these demons are often carved with an expression of defiant mockery. Their teeth are bared in a grin that suggests they are merely biding their time, waiting for the gods to blink or for the human heart to falter. They represent the kleshas, the mental pollutions, and worldly desires that cloud our judgment and disrupt the social order. The fact that they are suppressed but not destroyed is a sobering reminder from the ancients the darkness within us can be managed, but it can never be fully eradicated. The weight of the god's foot is the weight of our own constant vigilance, the necessity of using our reason to pin down the chaotic impulses that threaten to lead us into the abyss. In the digital landscape of the 21st century, the Amanojaku has found a vast new playground. No longer confined to the shadows of mountain villages or the footstools of temple statues, these entities have migrated into the currents of the internet. They manifest in the form of trolls who derive visceral pleasure from extinguishing the joy of others, or in those who use anonymity to disseminate poisonous falsehoods aimed at destroying a person's reputation. Just as the Amanojaku of legend wore the skin of the melon princess, modern digital Amanojaku hide behind fabricated personas and avatars to infiltrate communities and sow discord. They are the ones who find a story of hope and reflexively inject a dose of nihilism, or who target a vulnerable individual with the sole intent of witnessing their psychological collapse. They do not seek to build or to contribute. Their only currency is the chaos they create. In this age of information, the Amanojaku has evolved into a viral intelligence, a form of spiritual malware that exploits the vulnerabilities in our social connectivity to turn us against one another. How, then, does one defend against an enemy that feeds on the very fabric of our reality? The lore suggests a singular, powerful defense: the act of observation and the refusal to react. In the stories, the Amanojaku's power evaporates the moment its true nature is acknowledged. Its primary weapon is the confusion it generates. It relies on your anger, your frustration, and your despair to sustain its existence. To fight an Amanojaku is to give it exactly what it wants. Instead, the most potent weapon is a cold, unwavering clarity. When you sense an uncharacteristic malice or a deliberate attempt to subvert the truth, you must step back and observe the intent rather than the action. By refusing to engage emotionally, you deny the creature the sustenance it requires. It is like holding up a mirror to a shadow. The shadow has no substance of its own and can only exist in the absence of light. When the light of conscious awareness is shown directly upon the Amanojaku's manipulations, it becomes painfully aware of its own hollow nature and eventually flees back into the darkness. Consider this question deeply. If your closest confidant, the person you trust with your very life, began to subtly change their patterns of behavior, what would be your breaking point? At what point would you stop seeing them and start seeing the intruder? Is it a change in the cadence of their voice, or perhaps a sudden lack of empathy in a moment where it was once abundant? Your answer to this question is more than just a hypothetical exercise. It is the blueprint for your own psychological sanctuary. It is the boundary that the Amanojaku cannot cross provided you remain vigilant. The Amanojaku is a master of the weak point. It waits for the moments when you are exhausted by the pressures of life, when you are feeling the sharp sting of envy, or when you are drowning in the gray waters of self-doubt. It is in these moments of fragility that the creature whispers into your mind, convincing you that your friends are your enemies and that your virtues are actually your greatest flaws. You might think you are acting on your own accord, but you could very well be moving to the rhythm of a puppeteer you cannot see. The path to victory over this ancient demon is not through external combat, but through a rigorous, almost ascetic discipline of the self. You must constantly audit your own thoughts, questioning the origin of every flash of spite and every urge to deceive. In the final analysis, the story of the Amanojaku is a confrontation with the shadow, as described by Jungian psychology. It is the repository of everything we deny about ourselves, the selfishness, the cruelty, and the urge to destroy. When we refuse to acknowledge our own capacity for darkness, we allow that darkness to take on a life of its own, manifesting as the Amanojaku. The creature is not an outside invader so much as it is an unintegrated part of our own humanity. To defeat it is to integrate it, to acknowledge that the potential for being the Amanojaku lies within all of us. Only by acknowledging this can we ensure that we never find ourselves wearing the skin of another, or worse, becoming the one who is replaced. Always remember that the Amanojaku is listening, even now, to the internal dialogue you are having with this information. Perhaps a part of you is whispering that this is all nonsense, a mere collection of outdated superstitions. Ask yourself, is that your voice? Or is it the voice of the one who fears being discovered? The darkness only has power in the silence. Once the name is spoken and the nature of the beast is understood, the spell begins to break. The light of truth does not need to be aggressive, it simply needs to be present. In its presence, the shadows have nowhere to hide. And the Amanojaku, stripped of its disguise, is revealed for what it truly is, a lonely, hollow echo of the god's forgotten rage. May your heart remain a fortress of clarity, and may the light you carry within always be enough to keep the shadows at bay. Until we meet again in the next chapter of The Unknown, remain watchful, for the world is rarely as it seems. Until we meet again in the next story. If you have any feelings about this tale or any mysterious experiences of your own, please let me know in the comments. Your voice becomes the light that illuminates the next darkness.